alien research vessel, fully automated, is flying past our star system. It had intended to launch a probe, one that would swing through our system, sample some life forms if they're available, do a full scan, and then head back to the mothership. Um, this particular probe has been out there for, this research vessel has been out there for who knows how long, 100,000, million years, gathering data. Maybe it's gathering data for a species that doesn't even exist anymore. The problem is that when it goes to launch a probe, it instead launches a storage module. Maybe the software was written by Windows. Because this module that it launches instead of a probe has no drive, it just goes poof, and starts heading towards our star. It's got only the energy that it was, given when it was ejected erroneously from its research vessel. So it could take centuries, maybe thousands of years, for it to get to the point where the star really grabs it and begins to pull it into our gravitational wells. And eventually, it finds itself pulled into the gravitational well of Earth. It isn't a particularly large module, say the size of a Greyhound bus, but it does contain hundreds of samples of life from a number of different planets, say, or just one if you want. As it enters the atmosphere, of course, all the internal systems fail spectacularly, and all the stasis fields that have kept all the samples in a nice, well-preserved state fail. But most of the things on board also are completely burned up as it burns its way through our atmosphere. And it lands in the ocean. No one ever sees it land. No one even sees the entry path. It's in the middle of nowhere. Who knows how many things have fallen from the sky into the oceans that no one has ever witnessed. And the few things that did make it through our atmosphere and land in the ocean die because they're not suitable to survive on Earth, particularly underwater. Salt oceans are rather corrosive. But one thing makes it through, and it's a virus. At first, the virus just infects some very small, multi-cell organisms. But over time, it works its way into multi-celled bony fish. And it could be in that particular section of the ocean for decades, going from fish to fish to fish. Not spreading particularly quickly, not doing a great deal of harm. It's got a slow onset time, so it eventually does kill the host, but not before it's got a chance to spread, like any good virus. And like any good virus, it's adapting itself to the environment it finds itself in. But eventually, it gets swallowed up by a tuna. A very unlucky tuna, because the next day the tuna gets caught in a net and is hauled on board a Japanese trawler and headed towards the sushi markets of Tokyo. And it's even less fortunate for us that particular tuna ends up at a restaurant at the Tokyo International Airport. And by the time the first crew member on board dies, quickly followed by all the rest of them, hundreds of people have either directly contacted, consumed, or been infected by that tuna at the airport and hopped on planes and are gone. By the time they realize there's a pandemic involved, it's on pretty much every continent except for Antarctica. Millions die. And millions rolls into tens and then hundreds. And before it's all said and done, and it antivirus is finally discovered, a treatment for the thing, and eventually a vaccine, 1.5 billion people are killed by it. Probably another 500 or 600 million people from the ancillary diseases caused from the complete collapse of many social structures and cultures. But eventually, humanity survives. And there's one particular group that survives better than the others. That while the people get ill, they don't tend to die. And they do tend to survive and to have immunity. And those people are folks carrying the gene for sickle cell anemia. The disease changes them. At first, not in ways anybody can tell. It doesn't do additional harm to the people that survive the virus. But those that come next, in the next generation, well, since we're talking about a RPG concept, and we're in the realm of science fiction, it makes them metahumans. It opens them up to the realms of the fantastic. It makes them psychics of any and varied varieties. So let's talk about what we would do with this. You've got a group of people who have bona fide psychic powers all over the world. All of them black, or with African blood in their veins. All of them carrying the marker for sickle cell anemia. And all of them with some kind of power. Now, the majority of these are going to be pure ghost mutants. You're never going to be able to tell. But what does this do to race relations in the world? When suddenly the black people around you would be superheroes. And they're the only ones with these powers. How do the governments react? How does society react? How do the white supremacists react? Yes, I'm intentionally pushing buttons here. And I'm not entirely original in this. There was a science fiction novel I read years ago about the influenza outbreak that took place during World War I that had a similar concept. That everyone that wasn't of African descent was dying from it, but people from African descent weren't. So all the people who were from African descent had to do was wait. And pretty much all the rest of them were just going to fade away. So what happens in a world where black is power? True power. In the Marvel DC universe definition of power. And what kind of powers do you prefer for your psychics in a role-playing game? Do you prefer the full-blown D&D magic version like the Dreams Card Press does? Do you prefer Mutants and Mastermind? Do you prefer something like Stars Without Number, which is, I think, an excellent psychic set of powers? I really like. They're stripped down. They're very basic in many ways, but they're still very cool. I'm kind of leaning towards that direction, though I will admit that there's always the attraction for the whole Mutants and Mastermind school of thought. DC Adventures is the branded version of that. Which kind of grew out of Blood of Heroes. So there's a kind of a direct lineage there. So let's talk about the survivors of an alien virus and the world that the virus left behind and the gifts it has bequeathed humanity and what we as a species and as societies do about it.